And you are now live.
So this is Senate Appropriations, and we are continuing our work on the 23 budget adjustments. And we are going to hear some testimony from Gus Seelig, the Director of HCB. We want to talk a bit more about what the House did relative to their appropriation of $50 million. There's been a lot of discussion about budget adjustment versus consideration within the context of the 24 and how this amount was arrived at, and so that's where we are. That's we have what the House has, so we need to have a bit more understanding from you in terms of the urgency of this relative to the timing of the budget adjustment versus the big bill and the provision that we can make anything effective upon passage of the big bill.
Understood.
So thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. For the record, Gus Seelig, Director of the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board. And I want to introduce Holly Major, who's our Policy Director. And you'll see her around, and obviously we're both available anytime that any of you need us. So this recommendation did not come from the Housing and Conservation Board, and I will just try to recap for you where we are, where we've been. But I want to start just by saying that since Governor Scott took office, we've had a great working relationship with the administration. They've obviously been very supportive of the need for more housing in the state, going back to the establishment of a housing revenue bond, and they and you have been super supportive since the pandemic. And fundamentally, what the pandemic, I think, exposed was just how many vulnerable Vermonters in terms of their housing status we have, because the point in time count that was taken before the pandemic said we got 1,200 households, and even though 3,000 households have now been successfully and permanently rehoused, according to the Agency of Human Services, I think as of a month ago, there were 1,800 households still without permanent housing, and that included 600 kids, 500 to 600 kids. So we have a huge problem, and you've been responding to it. And a couple of years ago, you gave us, I think, CRF resources, perhaps. I can't remember if it was in budget adjustment or not. That came, I think it was, because it came with a requirement to get it all spent by the end of the year. And I think there was great skepticism about whether we could move the money, but we did, and I think ended up returning just a couple $100. I think last year you had something over $50 million in budget adjustment. Where we are today is that we, and I said this in the orientation joint fiscal asked me to do in December, is for this calendar year, for this fiscal year, we will either start or complete 1,000 units, and there are more on the way. Fundamentally, after our board met last week for the multifamily housing work we're doing, there's about $42 million still to allocate. If you're asking me, would we allocate another $15 million on top of that by the end of this fiscal year? I'd have to say, no, I don't think so. We would allocate some of it, I think, based on what the pipeline suggests we're going to get for applications, but certainly not all of it. So this is, I think, a policy choice for all of you. But what I would say is the importance, if you feel you want to invest more in permanent housing, is that developers choose to spend money if they think they can make a deal, and they choose not to spend money if they don't. And developing housing means plans and specifications, working with architects and engineers. It means permit applications, and all of that it means working through a local process, sometimes through state processes. All of that takes time and effort. So what has happened every time you have said we want to allocate money to you for more housing is the number of applications has gone up. And we're now seeing that, we're telling people we're in a spend down mode now. We want to make sure there's equity across the state, so we may not consider some applications right away while we're trying to make sure that an underserved region gets more housing. we've been doing this work in conjunction with something called the Housing Recovery Working Group, which includes the Agency of Human Services and other housing agencies in a state like the Housing and Finance Agency. And we're looking at the data they're giving us about where people are in hotels. I'm actually told that the numbers in Chittenden County are down a little bit, but that's because they've lost motel beds and they've moved people to Upland. So we're trying to get dollars all around the state. And so the value of anything you might choose to do in the Budget Adjustment Act would be, as it's been, that you'd be saying to the development community, we want to put more resources your way, and we want more projects to be coming in, looking for the resources so that more people can get housed. So I don't want to go on at length.
But right now, they know you still have 42 million out there.
They do know that, and we expect that we will have applications so that all of that would be allocated in this fiscal year and probably some beyond that.
If I could just ask about the sum, if you had to ballpark it, if not 50, then what do you think is likely that you could allocate?
It really depends on the quality of the applications. And so, there's a difference between a pipe, we survey all the regular partners a couple times a year. And there's just a difference between a full application that's fully baked and a pipeline of expectations, and sometimes things go wrong. A neighbor gets involved and says, I don't like this. In the local process, there's design review and somebody says, this building's too tall. So it's really hard to tell what more we would allocate, whether it's 10 million or 20 or I can talk with our housing director a little more and try to get more specific about that.
So just on the timing issue.
Yeah.
If, for example, we put it in the big bill and say effective upon passage, and we have that in the Senate version of the big bill, or the House could put it in as well, depending on what action we take. And you know that by May 1st, what impact would, between when this bill passes and May 1st, when that intent is made known, in terms of messaging to the developing communities?
It's kind of hard to say. There are things that happen unexpectedly. So we did a deal this year with a private developer in the Memorial Housing Partnership that brought 16 apartments to Stowe. They were so happy that he turned around and he's doing another 25 units in Morrisville. That was not in our pipeline at this time last year. The building is under construction. So, what I would say is that if you feel like as a policy choice you're going to want to be doing more, we will see more activity at a lot more activity at our September board meeting if you do something sooner rather than later, because people are making decisions today about what are their chances of success, and will they spend the money and take the risk.
So when is your next board meeting?
We have a board meeting in May, another in June, and we'll have one in September and another in December. So we keep it rolling through the year, and we never know when things are going to be delayed. We funded a project in Putney last year, and a single neighbor has had that under appeal since the permits were issued. Town is very supportive, but.
Okay, so I think Senator Birchwood and then Senator Wilson.
I think what you sort of answered it, you need to have a board meeting to allocate the funds. That's who's allocating the funds.
Yeah, well, the staff does not, the board does.
And their board's meeting May and June. So
Yes.
those would be your opportunity.
Yeah,
for,
but the applications don't come in a week or two ahead of time. They'd be coming in. It takes some time to get an application.
So that Senator Westman and Senator Stone.
I'm just wondering how backed up are people because they can't get builders and through the process, how backed up?
I think what we're seeing, we haven't seen any project get greatly delayed based on the availability of contractors. I think what we're finding is that that's driving costs up. You know, I was in the House Housing Committee, and one member from over in the Blueberry area said, well, all the guys in my area are busy building a $6 million house. That's why they're not bidding. So we're seeing less bidding overall, and we're seeing prices in a scary place. And I don't see that that's going to change in the near
Because I feel
future.
small. I'm doing a project myself this next summer, and we're having a terrible time lining people up. And it's all around. Part of the only reason I can get stuff is because I've done 8 projects in the last 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, I think at this, you know, we're not generally, we're employing larger contractors who have to be bonded. They're
Yep.
dealing with lots of subcontractors who they work for years, but I think it's a little different to build a single house and have a relationship with somebody. But yes, building, my daughter just bought a home, and, you know, she needed to find a plumber real quick in this recent weather. And she got lucky, but most people are very busy right now.
We're doing and
You're
I
doing
can
40 units?
4, not 40.
My
But
God, you're competing with Gus with 40.
no, I'm not doing
Oh.
40.
Yeah,
I'm not in that category. But
Yeah,
it, and the larger units that you just mentioned that they moved into, they've beaten up all the contractors
There's
here.
27 people here. They hate the place up.
Senator Starr.
Well, you know, knowing a little bit about what the developers and contractors have invested, you know, if you're on your game, you're always 6 months ahead of the building crew, if not more. And I mean, what difference does it make to us whether we take the 50,000 and put it in today?
Million.
Or-
I think it's millions.
Million, or take the $1 million and put it in the regular budget next week. It's still, you know, the money, if we really want to get a bang for our buck, I think you've got to keep these guys that are applying for and dealing with this in the loop that, you know, we do have another $50 million here that we're going to be spending next summer and fall and winter.
So let me ask, and then Senator Stevens, in the 24 budget, did you make a request of the administration?
we asked the administration for the funding that would come to us at a level that is consistent with what's in the law around property transfer tax. And then knowing that the governor had been big on housing, we just had in our budget, you know, a space for one-time funding, because we understood that there seemed to be one-time funding available, and his budget does not allocate.
No, I know. I just wondered, did you
for us,
request?
except as part of our base. We had the discussion with them. We told them there was plenty of demand, that we could do a lot more. And obviously the budget that he delivered did not include that.
So where did 50 million as opposed to 40 million, as opposed to whatever, as opposed to VHCB versus, I don't know, more into VHIP or more into home ownership? My question is, was that all part of, I don't know, in other words, 50 million is plunked here, but was there a broader testimony or discussion or decision-making relative to what we did in the budget adjustment versus the big bill? And maybe you can't answer that because you might not have been there to know whether that committee process occurred or not.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody understands that, you know, if you look at the number of kids that are without permanent housing, that we have, what in my opinion is a humanitarian crisis that we need to continue to address. I should just be clear with all of you that what we've done primarily with one-time funding is to add to the rental housing stock and also help all the shelter providers in the state. We have always had a single-family home ownership program that's benefited now 1,900 households over the years we've been around. We have invested in manufactured home communities. We have done this year a farm worker housing program that's gotten off the ground. We work with the Center for Independent Living on access modifications for people with disabilities so they don't have to leave their homes. So we do a whole range of things, and while the multifamily rental has been the biggest part of our work, it's not the only part. If I think about, as you know, Rural Edge just finally got an option from the Nuns for the land up in Newport, and they're going to put 26 apartments in at the old convent. There are going to be 3 or 4 phases over, I don't know, a decade or more to fully utilize that site. Newport wants home ownership. There could be opportunities for rental housing. When they start to spend money for something like that will depend upon, for the next phase of that site development will depend on when they think they can get funded.
Senator Lyons?
Yeah, no, we've talked a little bit about some of the pressing needs that we have in the state, including those with disabilities. And we also know there's a significant need for transitional housing and for folks who have mental health issues. And I don't know whether any of the proposals that have come from your board are going to look at allocating funds directly to those. Some hierarchy of needs is there. And I've talked about this before, but because
Yeah, so we try to cover the waterfront. So there are 2 projects in Senator Sears' neck of the woods that are recovery residences for people struggling with addiction. When I visited with you some years ago, it actually introduced me to somebody at Turning Point. So that's underway. There's another one up in Colchester that will be under construction. We would love to work with parent and have had a number of discussions with parents groups that you put aside some funding for adults with intellectual disabilities. We have done a number of projects that are what we call permanent supportive housing for people who've experienced homelessness, and that is housing where there are going to be ongoing services. So there's a whole, we have funded assisted living facilities across the state more than once. So there's a whole range of things we do. What I should say is, just to be clear, the board doesn't develop these projects. The board responds to people coming to us from their communities saying, here's what we need. So years ago, there was a fellow named Hugh Gates from Franklin, Vermont, and he won a lottery, and they wanted to do something for the elders in Franklin. And did a project with him, and then 5 years later, he came back and they added fundamentally an assisted living wing to their development. So communities generally tell us what it is they want in the way of those special needs opportunities.
Senator Sears?
If we were to take out 50 million, we're not guaranteeing we're gonna put 50 million into the FY24 budget, are we?
On top of that?
No, we take it out.
Oh,
We take this out of the 23 budget adjustment act. We're not guaranteeing we're gonna put 50 million in because the need may be 25 million or maybe 75 million. That would behoove, Gus to come back with proposals for one-time funds. That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, what I would say to you is, as we look at the pipeline today, there's a demand for 825 new apartments rental across the state that would likely seek over $100 million from us. There are home ownership proposals that will come to us as well. We will want to continue the efforts with the Center for Independent Living to make access modifications. So, the need in the state, quite frankly, is enormous. And I know that at some point you will not support this program in the way you have over the last several years with all the one-time federal money that's been available. But we have a problem that is much bigger than it was a couple of years ago. And I think you saw the story of Vermont Business a few weeks ago that said Vermont has the highest rate of in-migration as opposed to out-migration in the country, or the second highest rate, I can't remember which. The other thing it told us was that the people who were coming are not people who I was when I arrived in 1975, young and broke. We're getting mid-career and retirees coming here, and they're coming here with assets, and it's driving our housing market to a place that people who are here are having a hard time here.
We're seeing.
So a piece of what I would say to you if we were on the big bill in our base funding is I think we will be challenged, given the way the housing market has changed over the last 3 years, to have the impact we want us to have with our base funding when the one-time funding is gone. That's going to be similar to those pre-years. We have a different problem today than we had 5 years ago.
And in fact, I think the 24 bill actually, notwithstanding transfer, last year we made some progress to restore 10 million of it that got taken back out. So we're sort of back where we were prior. We're thinking we were making progress on eliminating the notwithstanding. So I guess if I understand the 24 budget in terms of the housing requests, and I think no one in the legislature is denying housing is probably the #1 need on the list. Well, our mental health system's in crisis as well. And so we're presented with a budget that actually lost ground relative to the notwithstanding funds, and nothing more was added. Is that correct?
That is where we're starting from.
Okay. And we're left with a budget that level funds those very systems that serve the people that are most vulnerable and are in the housing. So those of us who are working here around the table in terms of our budget considerations it's something that we know we have to address.
Yeah.
And so what is the amount that we can have? Is it 50? Is it all through BHCB? Should it be through a combination of, housing initiatives, some through, I don't know, the state housing folks? I don't have a clue to that. The only thing I can say that we recognize, and we know we've got to do more than what the governor's budget proposed, which is really a step backwards from where we've been, even with your base funding. So that is not a great place to be in, but it's the reality of the budget. It's been presented to us. So I think the question is, do we want to stake this out in advance of that larger discussion within 24? The timing issue, the process issue, that's really, it's not in any way, please, and anybody who's listening, it's not an issue that in any way are we disputing the fact that we have a tremendous need for housing. And we certainly know that in spite of our best efforts, we haven't made the progress we thought because property values have gone up for the very reasons you're talking about. And then the other is conversion to Airbnb or whatever. So we thought we would be further ahead than we are, but those other forces at work and the cost of development have all kind of work counter to the initiative. So that's what we're trying to struggle with here.
He's convinced me as one senator that there would be a need for one-time money in the 24 budget. He's convinced me we should take the 50 million out of the budget adjustment. I just don't want to commit to putting 50 million in one-time money in to 24 until we look at 24. But his need may be 100 million, and we can't meet that, but maybe we can meet 80. I don't know. Maybe we have to do the courthouses and give the judiciary their one-time money to get up and going on, having, backlogs of years or stuff. So I don't know what's going to compete, and I just don't want to, if we say it's going to be 50 million today, then we've already spent 50 million one-time money.
That's.
We could do that.
That's the difficult place we're in. You know, what I always try to do is to say to you, you know, here's how much good we can do with whatever dollars that you give us, and here's how much more we could do, or how much less as the budget changes. So I appreciate that you and the administration have to wrestle through this and figure out what the right balance is. I will say, Madam Chair, that, you know, we have supported allocations to the VHIP program. It plays a different role than we play, because it's getting to small landlords who want to reopen properties. It has different benefits, but it's had a positive benefit. And at the same time, there are opportunities that are like not even in my pipeline. So you may have read that the owners of the property that used to be the Austin School have plans, and they'd love to develop 300 units on that campus, and it's absolutely gorgeous. The Housing Trust of Rutland County just bought, not the part of the St. Joseph campus that Casella bought, but the West Campus. There are opportunities, you know, the city of Montpelier bonded to buy the old golf course at the Elks, and they promised to vote to get the housing there. So there are going to be opportunities, but if you want to house people who make, who I consider the essential workforce, who are making $60,000 a year or less, $70,000 a year or less, people who make 22 bucks an hour in most of the state, not in Chittenden County, do not qualify for tax credit housing. So that essential workforce, from my perspective, needs to be a big part of the state's priorities whenever you provide funding, whether it's now or in the budget in the big bill. And we'll work with you either way. You know, what I said to the House Committee is the sun's still coming up tomorrow. Whatever you do, it's a question of how quickly you want to move things.
Person.
What would be the total amount if we didn't stay in the transfer tax?
Assuming we stay level in the capital bill, well, the transfer tax would call for something around $28 million, which was somewhere between 27 and 28, with the capital bill for 3.8, so it's around $24 million.
In the scheme of things, that funding stream relative to what we've been able to put in with one-time money seems kind of puny.
Yeah, I thought it was gonna be a bigger number, yeah.
Yeah, we have a transformed real estate market that's different than what we dealt with 20 years ago.
I was just gonna say, I appreciate the discussion. We have also buried in here, talked about a lesser amount than 50 million to, as Representative Lanford put it, keep our foot on the pedal. You talked about how you thought you could probably allocate 10 or 20 million more. So there's that option as well, a reduced amount with most of the decision deferred to big bill, but not all.
That to me seems like a mid-road path. I think what you said to us is we need to keep the message that we want to keep our foot on the gas, but just how we want that all to look needs to be in context of a bigger picture for next year.
Well, also the message, well, I don't know, I guess it probably takes money to develop these proposals, but, you know, we could say, you know, submit proposals with the prospect of, you know, more coming, but I don't know how that is a very good message, or whether the developers would say, I'm not going to put in the amount of time to put together a proposal until I have more certainty that money's there. But they're all competing with a fixed amount of money right now.
They are. So I think any signal will be a positive one and well received. Obviously, you know, I mean, I think you can recall discussions in which whether it was the first 33.5 million from the CRF program or subsequent allocations, nobody expected the dollars would move as quickly as they have. And right now, we're only struggling with one appeal, as I mentioned, I would have thought there would have been more, that would have slowed things down. So I'm quite confident we're gonna meet all the ORCA deadlines. That we put in front.
Seal of approval.
Yeah,
We certainly don't want to cause a recession.
This money is clearly earmarked for housing, because your 28.5 is really, can be divvied up between conservation and housing. So, this
Yes.
is, we're talking about purely
Yes.
addressing our housing shortage in this discussion. So the question before us is whether, recognizing that we need to have the benefit of a larger conversation in terms of overall money and, other funding pressures and requests that are yet to be fully developed. Do we want, how far we want to move forward in obligating funding in, out of this pot we've got of one-time money? And so the proposal is perhaps move forward with an additional 25 million. And then we're going to be working on budget, and well, the House is building it right now. So it's, the issue is that 6-week difference between when there's kind of some certainty about what would be additional funding. I know that the development community and the housing community had said that probably the need was about 175 million. So anything we're doing is still short of what has been put out there. It's, the funding need. Other questions that we have? Gus? Thank you for making yourself available. So we're trying to ponder this.
thank you for the incredible support you've given us over the last several years. I'm just overwhelmed by it. And we're all trying to do our best, and we really appreciate what you all have put into this.
And you're doing amazing work.
Thank you.
And our local housing entities are just stepping right up, because that's who you're having to work with, right?
Yeah,
Generally.
yes, it's local groups of your citizens primarily. We have had some private developers come forward that we've worked with as well. There's a young fellow he and his parents are doing a 6-unit building that we approved in Bradford last week. So it's been a range of options, but primarily nonprofit organizations that have.
So the question really becomes one of the market that you're addressing and the need, and then the hot people, they call it the missing middle, but that's another discussion we need to have, and that is that housing need. And people are saying we can't, the workers, they won't move to Vermont because they can't find a place to live, and they're not going to necessarily maybe meet the income qualification through some of the housing that is being built. I think mixed housing does provide some limited opportunity, but.
Yeah, I would just, again, say that for me, the missing middle starts around $42,000, where in most of the state, you stop qualifying for what's called tax credit housing, which is a federal benefit. So it's like, when you're over 60% of the area median income, you stop qualifying for that tax credit housing. And so I just would say to you, as you ponder that need, that can be somebody making as little as $22
The issue that I hear a lot about is if you go through a small town, you know it, the community, there'd be one person living in the house, maybe two in some cases, but a lot of the time just one. And, you visit with those people and, well, I'd love to move into a little housing development for seniors, but there is none in my community. Well, if you could get those folks into, a lot of communities have these, but a lot still don't. Then that opens their house up, which maybe a 3-bedroom
Yeah,
or
that's
whatever.
been talked about, or
Yeah.
home share. That's the other option.
Home share.
Home share.
Well,
Keep up the good work, Gus.
thank you all. I know
Thank
this
you.
is hard stuff to wrestle with.
Yeah, well,
No,
I
I
guess
think
it's
you're
rather
close.
disappointing that the 10 million progress we thought we were making on the transfer.
We only lost.
Well, maybe we'll figure out how to consider to make progress, Madam Chair.
I guess,
As long as there's enough left to get your paycheck at the end of the week.
thank you for coming in.
Take care, Ann.
So we've finished. Stephanie, do you want to go back?
Sure, for a few 10 minutes.
Yeah, until 4 o'clock, maybe we can close out 2 more sections. And then we can make a final decision. And I don't know what our economic development committee is gonna, they've been spending a lot of time on housing. So,
Money.
Would they have an appropriation in there?
no, but oftentimes they want to take a position in terms of we support it or we don't.
Well,
We just said we were in favor of the cut.
Yes, and we were down to, what was happening with the
Like,
1.199
So
million.
that is, I did look that up.
Okay.
That's the cost of pay act. And so that's why you see the up in the general fund.
Just that-
What section are we at?
We're
You're
at
in
B
public
three
health.
12, and so all we're doing is paying the staff. Okay, so 313,
So we close that.
yes, we did.
And then in 313, the ADAP section, you see it down, and that's basically on the money that was available, basically it wasn't carry forward from the previous year. So that's what you're seeing in 313.
And the house changed.
The house changed, and there's a note in the memo. There's a position that is funded through May, and they're extending it by June, and I can't remember what the note said.
It says for the month of June after federal grant ends.
Yeah.
So they're backfilling a grant with,
And so the note wants us to move that down to the grant line, and not on the personal service line, $12,000. So we would, the $12,810 we would simply take out of the personal service. We don't change the total at all. It's just up what line it runs in, because it's a grant. According to the memo from, it doesn't belong in the personal
so why would
service.
it be a grant? If they're a health department position?
Funds will be expended through an amendment to extend a sub-recipient grant.
Oh, something.
Oh, there it is.
We all set to care, so it funds it through the end of the fiscal year, and we'll just move it to the proper line. And I agree with the house.
Yeah.
Mental health, 314.
314.
This has got to be the state hospital.
Yes.
And all the traveling nurses offset by, so that was like 11 million. Probably because it's an IMD, that's pretty much on the state side.
Yep.
The combination of vacancy savings and the travel nurse contract.
Traveling nurse was about 11 million, but the savings brought it down to a net.
And then you have the small amount of money that's in for the micro residential operating expenses.
In Washington County.
Yeah.
And the house made no changes to that.
You made no changes to that. You also have a UVM medical center contract increase in the personal service line.
You know,
What else is there? Yes. And then you have PMI in here as well.
Yeah.
so we'll just concur with the house and the governor's recommend on that, recognizing that it's an awful lot of money for traveling nurses.
That's killing.
It's killing everybody.
So B 316.
This is DCF's admin line.
This is the same thing where there's a reduction in the federal funding for the coordinated care teams. And it's a replacement
Yeah.
of the federal funds with.
And so what you're seeing, the up in the general fund is to extend that. And we might be doing, that's where the memo is recommending that it's only 1/4 instead of the.
Right, so,
half
but the
year.
governor's change here is almost 5.4 million.
Yes, and
And most of it is federal funds, 4.6.
so that's the comprehensive child welfare information system.
Well,
That's the
we
That's it.
know that
Yeah.
data
Yeah.
system is really, and it's,
That's the majority of the change you see in this line.
is for the support of the child welfare. And the governors recommend. And then,
Yes.
and then the only thing the House did was related to the continued funding for the cost of the coordinated care teams.
Yeah.
Which we'd already agreed to in another section, so. Okay.
So is this the last year for the information system? I think it must be coming to.
The child care IT.
Yeah.
This is
No, this
not
isn't
child, this is child welfare.
The child.
Oh, child welfare, okay.
It's not the Bright Futures.
Sorry,
Yeah.
that was.
No, I think
It's the last.
we have a real problem with the data availability and that child welfare.
Yeah.
All right, so, the House made just a minor change to continue that. I think we would agree, consistent with our prior decision and the governor's change, we would agree to continue the IT system.
Okay.
All right, 317. This is a lot of changes. The big change is the up in general fund of 10 million.
Yep.
Family services. General fund and a down of global commitment.
Taking 9.2 million, 9.3 million out of global commitment.
Yeah, I see that.
Running it with federal.
Having to replace it with general fund.
It is, the note here is TCM, and I can't remember what that stands for.
Targeted case management.
That's right.
Wow, there's an acronym you couldn't come up with.
Oh.
Unbelievable.
Madam
That's
Chair had it right there.
So that's it, it's related to switching the funding source for that, that's the main, they're not exactly equal, because there's a couple other, true up
What
transactions.
happened with targeted case management? Oh, this is where they were billing,
Yes,
remember? Their system was double billing and they were having to
Oh, I was
repay.
just gonna ask
Yeah.
why.
That was the testimony.
Yeah.
I guess the feds didn't want to be done.
They didn't want to pay twice.
So I think,
Cheapskates.
so I think in the House, made no changes, so, I don't think we have much choice. But I agree that we've got to address that. Child development, and this was simply the caseload was lower than they budgeted, if I remember correctly.
that's the majority of it.
As a result of the pandemic,
I think probably.
we're gonna see an increase going forward.
I think we would. And so it'll be interesting to see what the caseload estimate is in the 24 budget compared to that. But what we've got, this is based on actual versus estimate here. And the House made no change. So this is just a truing up of the estimated caseload coming in lower than, actual coming in lower than the estimate.
There's a net in here, there's a little bit of an up for children's integrated services
Yes.
as well. It's netted up.
So the caseload out underwrite, increase in children's integrated CIS. So that's just a pure, seems like, moving the money to where wasn't needed. Oh my, what am I?
Going, say,
I know, but I want you to know, last year, we did something new. We got an appropriation in the tax bill. On my new one. We remember when the governor had so many different proposals that would reduce revenues? And I went next door and I made the list of where we were not doing well, and we had not increased the state supplement. I asked people, do you know what the AABD state supplement is? They didn't have a clue. It hadn't been increased in 20 years. So we increased the first time. And that should help reach up families, because a number of those families, the parent either is an SSI beneficiary or a child is. So that was a fairly significant increase after 20 years. So the question is, how many people know about the AABD supplement to the SSI federal payment? Not many.
7 now.
We've done it.
Yeah. Just one.
So this was just caseload driven, I believe.
Yeah, and carry forward from previous years and is what pre-documents.
So now we've had that down memory lane, and January 1 was when that increase was going to become effective. So I don't know whether you had any calls of thanks, but we
So then
did.
why the decrease or increase?
Because it's carry forward and caseload both.
Whoops,
You don't break that much.
don't break that mold.
All right, so now we're into a big up, and this is caseload, but in the other direction, and let's reach up.
You're okay with general assistance, that's also
Oh,
one that had, a
sorry.
small- that had a small amount of money that could be scooped out because of, on a one-time basis in the PA.
Well, we may need it before the,
Yeah.
we finish it up, but for now. And then reach up is the big one, over 9.4 million, and that's all caseload, as I understand it.
Yes. A portion, 600, a little over 660 of it is Lund program. Actually, it looks like about $1 million. It's in 2 transactions, 662 and $400,000.
So you think it's a total of 1 million,
Lund is $1 million of
of the 9.4.
yeah.
It's on, was it,
I reach up.
was it 1.2, or is that in it?
I have
One and
404
two.
and 662, so it's like 1 point shy of 1.1.
But it's in the budget adjustment. Is that continuing in the base?
I don't have it in front of me, but I don't know if it is. I'll have to look at the governor's ups and downs. We have them. It's just not in my head.
But this is certainly for 23. And the caseload, they said just, it was so hard to do some estimating in terms of the impact. What the caseload would come in, and so they estimated really low. They came in higher. No, do we have the current caseload?
I haven't asked for a snapshot in a while. I don't know if they included one.
I know I have one, but I think it's old.
We had one when we did the newsletter in December. I know we had one, and I sent it to you. You know how they looked from, I'd gotten it from the beginning of, I think, 22 calendar year forward, or 21 fiscal year, a couple of years. So you can see the progression of caseload by category and reach up. You found it. Of course.
Yes, I just happen to have it.
So the numbers go up or numbers?
They've been steadily growing.
They've been steadily growing.
It's growing like gangbusters.
So.
And we probably could have noticed it last year and adjusted midway if we paid closer attention to the caseload.
Yeah, for example, between June and October, the number of households went up, but the number of beneficiaries went from a reach up from 8,100 to 8,800, so over 700 individuals. So and their caseload in terms of households went up by, oh, maybe not quite, 3,500. So the number of households went up about, I don't know, 75 households. But those benefits, these are benefits to families with children.
With what we pay, which is very little, and the amount of work that there is available, you think that, do we ever clip that they drop off if they go to work or something?
No, well,
So
there's
they
a,
have-
there is
Yeah.
a formula that exempts a portion of their wages, so there is a slope. In
We
addition,
extended
we
the
also
childcare.
have what we call Reach Ahead, which provides childcare for an extended period of time. So we have, and then for some people, if they're have a work barrier, or they could be on SSI, then that SSI benefit is not counted. So, but there is a work requirement.
But we ought to, I mean,
Let me put this in perspective. The number of recipients in June of this year, when we closed out, was 8,678. When we did welfare reform back in Howard Dean's day, the number of recipients was 28,000. It was more than 20, yeah. So just to keep that in perspective, the number of families and the number of children that are here, but nevertheless, that's still quite a few children. It's probably 1.5 children per household that are living in basically abject poverty. They're way, way below the poverty line. And the big problem that we've been talking about is that the food stamp program, 3 Squares, has been giving them a supplemental benefit, and that's going away. So these families are these are the children that are really suffering.
Some of those families are seeing, we'll see a drop in March of $180 a house. And there's 40,000 households that are getting accepted.
That's a month, 180 a month.
And some of the elderly and disabled as well. So, but, so anyway, as it relates to the reach up the number of households, you've got 3,500 households. That's statewide. That's not a large.
well, it might be part of that homeless crew there that Gus was talking.
Oh, they are,
about.
they are, and they've been getting the rental assistance, and their rental assistance, it was always going to the end of June.
So anyway, just to put the caseload in some historical perspective, but that's quite a significant, and that was when work requirements went in, but a lot of money went in to support education and training and childcare at that point. All right, well, my
Yeah.
filing system didn't let me down.
We need those people working.
Yes, well, anybody, let me tell you, if you can work, you're gonna work, because you can't live on $830.
They might be worried that if they went to work and earn whatever, that they're gonna get bumped off from that, whereas if it was, stretched out.
I go around the cliff.
Yeah, I mean, move that out so
Well,
they
we
could
have,
earn.
we have been,
We've
we've been increasing the earnings exclusion and so forth for that very reason. And then we added on the extension of childcare support.
So they get the full
That's,
subsidy
that would be good.
for a longer period of time.
So,
But how, does it say that you can earn $8,000 and you'll still receive your reach up
no,
benefits?
your reach up benefit would be reduced. So they would calculate what you have for countable wages. So they would start with gross, and then there would be an income, because you've got to pay Social Security and so forth. So there'd be a standard deduction. And then there's an exclusion of your wages. It used to be 30 and a third. So the first $30 and a third of the remainder.
If I make it real simple,
No,
you learn, like they do with people
And
that get
the
on
benefit-
social
The
security.
benefit is gonna vary depending on household size. It's gonna vary depending on other expenses. The benefit's gonna vary depending on whether you have child support or some other form of income. So calculating benefits is not easy. I remember when the benefits used to be a standard need for a family of four is $199 a month. Rent was $85 a month, and you got a telephone allowance of $4.79. And a month. Yeah, can you imagine having a phone for $4? That used to
Not
be
anymore.
basic service. And, then you could have some special allowances, $15 a month to pay for dental care, if you could get dental care. And so a lot of my kids always had dental care, and I put in the additional money. But so it's not an easy calculation, and it's based on each individual family's size, rental arrangement up to a maximum. But the total benefit, if you had no other income, is $830. And if you've got a parent who can't work because of a disability, and many of them are single parents, they're not two-parent households.
Oh, no, I know that. Yeah, you talk with an elderly person maybe younger than I, that's just retired from and they're on social security. They're sitting home, they aren't working. Well, I just retired and, on my social security. Well, if you talk to them a year or two later, they're working, they find a job because they don't have to pay $1 for every $2 they earn, they have to pay in $1. So they don't work during that time, but once that
You
job,
have to be 70 before your wages are
yeah,
not counted. There's great incentive to get old. Yeah.
Right. There you go. That's
you
one
don't
good thing
want,
about it.
you don't want to draw until you're 70.
Well, you don't, if you can, because then you get a higher benefit.
Right.
You get a maximum benefit.
Well, you gotta do something.
So I'm gonna suggest that we finish up here. I'm going to suggest that we get through page 11, and then we're gonna call it a day.
Okay.
Okay.
So we've been talking a lot about reach up and the families. We're talking about OEO, and that's a down 800,000, and that is been the House agreed. That must be probably just reversed.
It carried forward and it's not reverted, it's just being scooped out here
Yeah.
because there's been past carried forward available
It's a very modest
or
amount
lower
against,
demand on whatever
against the 20 million.
on the general fund piece of it. And then weatherization is simply a bucketing out of grants and into operating.
So on all of the caseload reduction pieces that we're looking at, we can anticipate increased demand.
Well, reach up, we know it had to be adjusted way up.
Yes, no, but for those that we've taken, that the caseload.
Oh, like the
down,
childcare.
and the childcare. So is this gonna, is that, I can't.
This is
remember.
just temporary.
This is temporary, is it carried forward?
This is just truing up for the year based on,
But the
What was-
base doesn't change.
yeah,
And
they start from last year's base to build 24. And so if it's, some of these are one time because of carry forwards from previous year capacity and being swept out. So if they closed 22 with one-time money available, that's what you see a lot when we're sweeping out the general fund pieces. In bits and pieces, it's not permanently changing what the position of the program's at.
The base funding is
Yeah.
remaining intact for 24. So these are kind of one-time adjustments.
And so you won't see them, you'll see things like the caseload and reach up run through from what we passed last year to what's needed in budget adjustment, to what's proposed in 24.
But the
But something-
dollars that are there are real dollars. So are those dollars that we are saying are not utilized this year, are they being carried forward?
No,
No.
we're using them
We're just.
to meet other.
To meet other
higher
needs.
costs. You know, in this case,
We
for
did
example,
we did transfer those somewhere.
yeah, well, we needed 9.4 million in reach up.
Right, we did it.
So, because we underestimated that caseload, and so we had to move more money. So it's moving money that is available, not because we've done anything deliberate to reduce services or reduce, eligibility. It's just a matter of our estimates will fall off, and sometimes it's one side or the other. But the amount on the childcare, certainly when you look at the up and the reach up is, it all goes into falling to the bottom line and then allocated out to where the costs are higher.
At some point, the demand is gonna overcome all of this, and we're going to have to.
Well, and that's where we would look at the base caseload, not the budget adjusted caseload, and what's being carried forward to 24. And I don't know whether it's gonna be the estimated for 23 plus more. That would be part of the budget adjustment, big bill. I mean, for 24. Okay, so it's 4:15, and we've made it through page 11 out of 20.
Yeah,
That's not bad.
well, that's the numbers, and then you have to go on to the packet with language tomorrow, so you're here all day tomorrow.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Optimism.
You shorten that up.
Is that Stephanie Downer?
Yeah, it is. So I am going to suggest that we call it a day. On that optimistic note from joint fiscal staff. And we will pick up tomorrow at the top of page 12.
Now I know where no one gets it from.
Yes, please.